So you want to know how to make one of the all-time great comfort meals. Here's a well-tested recipe for chicken tikka masala that yields tender chicken, lots of gravy, and it just warms your soul in the right way. The flavors here completely outpace the work required to get them. Today I'm going to give you the step-by-step recipe you need for making restaurant-quality chicken tikka masala at home. The two main components we need to get this right are the tender pieces of chicken themselves and the super flavorful gravy they're going to be covered in. So let's start with the chicken. If you've been around the channel for any length of time, you know how partial I am to chicken thigh. This is 1.5 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thigh that we can add to a marination bowl. Just use a big bowl that you can cover in plastic wrap to save on dishes. The vehicle for the marinade itself is this Greek yogurt, just super fatty and a little acidic. It's important that marinades have some level of acid in them so they actually penetrate the meat. Grate in 4 cloves of garlic and 1 knob of ginger, then season this with a lot of salt, Kashmiri chili powder, garam masala, turmeric, coriander, and cracked pepper. I like a lot of coriander here because I have to leave the cilantro out in the rest of the recipe. If I have a lot of cilantro throughout the gravy, I really just can't taste anything else. Give this a mix, cover it, and let it marinate for at least a few hours. Longer is better, up to about overnight. These flavors are going to layer on each other and stack up, so by the time we get to the final dish, we've got something really special. This really means the marinade is almost going to mirror the spices that are going in the gravy. Using the same seasonings and flavorings in different ways helps create complexity in the dish. All the marinade measurements and the measurements for everything you need are in the description. With that marinating, let's start on the gravy prep, then we can broil our chicken and then make the gravy. We need to thinly slice a medium red onion, cut it in half, remove the paper, and then make pole-to-pole slices. We need about 600 grams of ripe tomato. These are gonna break down much faster if we cut them now, so roughly dice these up. A lot of recipes call for canned tomatoes, but I think the sweetness of fresh tomatoes goes a long way here to help cut through some of the spice that we're gonna be adding. All of this is gonna be blended, so I'm just gonna crush the garlic and slice the ginger. Same thing with the chili pod. There's no need to be fancy with the cuts here. This is just one Thai green chili that is actually pretty spicy, so if you don't want a hot chicken tikka masala, go ahead and leave this out. I just like my food spicy. That's it for prep, so let's grab our chicken and get going. Place your marinated chicken on a sheet tray with a wire rack and let this ride under a low broiler. These are gonna be cooked in about 20 to 25 minutes, but turn them every few minutes just to make sure that they're charring nicely on both sides. Honestly, these don't have to be fully cooked here, so if they're browning fast, go ahead and just take them out. They can finish cooking in the gravy. Chop these into bite-sized pieces, but make sure they're still large enough. Something like this, where you just kind of cut the piece in half down the middle and then make slices, is really good. Let the chicken cool and let's make our sauce. Now look, there are a lot of different complex ways to make this, but this is how I like to do it. It's really simple, but it does require either a blender or a stick blender, so just be aware of that. In a Dutch oven, begin heating cooking oil over medium-high. Classically, this would be ghee, but you can use any neutral oil if you just don't have that lying around. Let's start with just the sliced onions for now in the heat. Cooking out the onions is a really important step for any Indian cooking, as browning gives them a lot of delicious flavor that can only happen now. Once they're browned, add in your cumin seed, cardamom pods, garlic, ginger, chilies, Kashmiri chili powder, and coriander. This is basically every seasoning that's gonna be enhanced by toasting. We're gonna hold back a few of the more delicate spices until the end. A note about Kashmiri chili powder, this is like really bright red chili powder. I think if you don't have this, you can use cayenne and paprika to sort of approximate a similar flavor. Use about 2 parts paprika to 1 part cayenne. It is decently spicy, so just be aware and taste it as you go as you're making your own seasoning. Toast these in the heat with the onions until nice and fragrant, probably about a minute or two. Be careful to make sure that the ground spices don't burn on the bottom. Once toasted, go ahead and deglaze this with a little bit of water just to make sure that everything's brought up before we add in our tomatoes, along with roughly 300 grams or a little over a cup of water. There's really no need to be exact here. This is gonna cook down to your preference later, so just get enough water in to make sure that the tomatoes can actually cook in the sauce and it's not like looking dry. Bring this up to a simmer and cook it over medium-low uncovered for around 45 minutes. Basically, we're cooking out all of the raw flavors and turning this into a really cohesive sauce. Be sure to stir this every few minutes just to make sure that the bottom doesn't burn though. After this time, the tomatoes should look like this, where they're really nice and softened and everything smells way more delicious. You can add this to your blender or just use the stick blender in the pot. Just make sure that you get the sauce smooth here. No one wants to bite into a whole cardamom pod. Just as a heads up, let this cool slightly before blending it so you don't get hot liquid everywhere. And if you're using like a lidded blender, be sure to open the top, that little cap that you can sort of open that and put a towel over the top. That way it can steam and vent some of the heat, but it's not going to splash everywhere. This is something you see like chefs do in videos and stuff. There's a reason for it. They're not just like trying to look cool. This can go back into that same pot over medium again, just to reduce it further to your texture. This is going to be where you can adjust the final texture, so cook it until thick, but not too thick. Think nice and spoonable, but not gloopy. Taste this for seasoning and be sure that the salt levels are right. Mine needed a lot of salt here because I didn't add salt with the tomatoes. Add in your chopped chicken, and if your chicken wasn't fully cooked yet, now is the time to finish it. If it's cooked and your sauce is thick, add in your garam masala, Kasoori methi, more on that in a second, heavy cream and butter. The cream is sort of to taste and color preference. If you need to balance spice like I did, add in more cream and some sugar to taste. The Kasoori methi is fenugreek, a mildly bitter herb that is another hallmark of Indian cooking. You can leave it out if you don't have it, but know that the dish is gonna be missing what I think is a key ingredient in Indian cooking. At this point, just taste it one last time for final salt levels and make sure that it is singing beautifully. With any kind of dish like this, the sauce really is so important. So make sure that it's well seasoned to go with rice or naan or whatever you're serving it with. I like to serve this with basmati rice, but you could just serve it with some garlic naan as well. A bunch of chopped cilantro would be classic in the dish and on top, but just pretend it's there. Again, I mentioned I can't really eat it, so I have to leave it out for me. But if you want it, go ahead and add it into the dish as well as on top. I mentioned layers of flavor earlier, and I think this exemplifies it more than anything else. The warmth of the spices coating and marinating that chicken are mirrored in the spices of the gravy itself. You're getting complex sweetness from the sugar and the umami that exist in the tomato itself. This is why I like to use whole fresh tomato rather than canned tomato. We're getting richness from the cook itself that we're doing. We're not doubling down on richness from already cooked tomatoes. So it's got a little bit of brightness, a little bit of sweetness to go along with all of that rich spice from the chili powder, from the coriander, from the turmeric. Just beautiful spiced chicken tikka masala that you want to absolutely dive into. It kind of envelops you like a warm blanket. Yeah, it's killer. This is so good. It also makes great leftovers. It gets spicier and more flavorful the next day. Massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. They get some cool benefits like early access to videos and direct contact with me, and I get to keep making videos like this. So it's a bit of a win-win. Consider checking it out and consider becoming a patron. Also, if you want to support the video, just subscribe and tell your friends about it. It means the world to me. Now, if you're looking for a recipe that's a little bit lighter, check out this lemongrass chicken bowl. The recipe is just as easy as this chicken tikka masala, and it's just as delicious. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.